episode on FernCrafts. This is serious knitting for not so serious knitters, and today we're going to put some of that increases and decreases that we've just learned into something a little more practical. So for that we are going to be working on how to go about doing these increases or decreases. And there is out there very commonly known magic formula to determine how to go about the increases and decreases. It's also called the shaping formula, the more or less formula, different names, and I'm just going to call it the increase-decrease formula. And this formula actually comes from a Diophantine equation, and that is just a little history blurb by a really smart guy, mathematician, way back when in Alexandria called Diophantus. And he was a really clever guy, and he was one of the first mathematicians to involve symbolism in algebra. So you can read all about him and the Diophantine formula on Wikipedia, which is where I got that information from. So now coming back to this formula in itself, it is basically, we would have to know a few things. And the first thing is determining your gauge, which we have looked at in another video. You can go and see how to determine gauge, and it's very simple. So you will need your gauge meaning the number of stitches per inch or per centimeter, whichever measurement you're using, over the number of stitches as well as the number of rows. So you want to do it horizontally as well as vertically. So after you determine that, then you want to determine the length that you need and convert that into how many rows it would take you to cover that length, okay? So once you have your number of rows, your starting stitches and your ending stitches, we can get started, okay? So now I have drawn out here very simply a diagram, if I can back it out here. And basically what it is these are your starting stitches, which I've put in by X, over a number of rows, W, and your ending stitches, Y. Now in this diagram, it's showing that I've increase my stitches going from my X to my Y, but you could very easily just turn this around and be decreasing it, and that would be your X and this would be your Y. It wouldn't really matter. Okay, so but basically what it is we're going from some number of stitches to another number of stitches over a number of rows, and your larger number of stitches, in this case it's Y, would just be your X, whatever you have. If you could draw like a rectangle, and then you have equal amounts of both sides, and those two sides together would add up to D, which is the difference. So that's what that would be. Now the difference is very important. You need that. And also you need to figure out, are you increasing on both sides or just on one side? And is it left leaning or right leaning? It doesn't really matter if it's left or right leaning, but you need to know whether you're increasing on both sides or on one side. And if you're increasing on both sides, then you will need to divide your difference by 2. So now I've put in numbers just to help us work it out. Say my starting number of stitches is 5. I'm going to be increasing to 27 over a number of rows, which I have determined as 51 rows. So let me just write that in there. Okay, my number of rows would be 51. Okay, so then I have my 27, that's my bigger number, my lesser number of 5, I do the difference, and I get 22. Because I'm increasing on both sides, that's 22 stitches, so 22 stitches divided by 2 stitches per row, because it's 2 stitches per row that I'm decreasing, I would end up with 11 rows that I would have to decrease over. Now I could easily decrease every row for 11 rows and then, you know, work the rest, because 51 is much larger than 11. But what would happen is I would get this really fat increase, and then it'll just be straight up like that, and that's not what we want. We want a gradual increase. Okay, so yeah, so that's why we need to use this formula. So now let's go on to the formula. I'm just going to set my tripod down. So again, if we can remember, the numbers are back here, 11 rows, and I have 51 rows in total. Okay, so then what we would do is divide 11, that's the number of rows we need to divide, over the total of 51 rows. And we want all whole numbers, so 11 goes into 51 4 times, and that leaves us with 44, and we have a difference of 7. Okay, so now we're going to add one number on top here, which takes us to 5, and then we want to do the difference between 11 and 7, which is 4. So our numbers are 4, 5, 7, and 4. And the way to read that would be the 4th row 4 times, and then the 5th row 7 times. All right. So now this is a very common formula. A lot of other people have discussed this, but I want to point out that Cheryl, and I'll put her channel down below as a link. She's done a really nice video on this, and I actually learned it from her. So I want to, you know, give her the credit for this. And this is really, she explains it very well. So, and then I had a question about, so now how do we do this? Do we do the 4th row 4 times, then go and do the 5th row 7 times? And then she said, well, you could do it like that, or you could actually break it down and make it a little more even, which I like. I think that makes more sense. So I'm going to break it down, and you break it down on the time side, I understand, okay? So I'm going to break it down as 2 and 2, and then here it would be 3 and 4. And these numbers just add up to this number. I hope that's clear. Okay, so then what I could do instead would be the 4th row 2 times, and then the 5th row 3 times, go back and do the 4th row another 2 times, and the 5th row 4 times. And that would give me the total number of decreases. Now, how do we know it's the total number of decreases? Okay, now to confirm that we have done it correctly, we want to go back and calculate. So first of all, it's going to be 4 plus 7, the number of times that we're increasing it, which will give us 11. And then because we're increasing 2 stitches on every row, it is 11 times 2, which is 22 stitches. And then we started off with 5 stitches on the bottom, plus our 22 increased stitches, and we will end up with the 27 stitches, which is great. Now, there are some pointers in this that you want to take into consideration. and that is not to increase on the very last row. You want to at least leave a little space, you know, before the last row that you need to reach at. So if it was a total of 20 rows and I wanted to do the increases over the 20 rows, I would drop it down to 19 or 18 rows, whatever makes a little sense. So in this case, the reason I picked 51 rows was because my total number of rows was 54. So I wanted 3 rows of no increases at the end. So I subtracted from 54, 3. It doesn't have to be 3. It's whatever you're comfortable with. If you don't want too much of a straight edge at the end, then you can just leave it at 2 rows or whatever. So mine was 54. I dropped it down to 51, and that's where I worked it out as. So I hope this has helped. Do check out Cheryl's channel. She has lots of great tips. I'm working on a sweater solely by her directions that she has going there, and then customizing the sweater for myself actually, and it's been such a great help. So I hope it's been helpful to somebody, and if so, do post your comments down below. And if you haven't done so already, do subscribe. You'll be the first to know when I upload a video, and we'll be learning all these tips and tricks on knitting for not so serious knitters. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy knitting. This is serious knitting for not so serious knitters.